Hi, my name is Rogue Theory, and I've studied film, creative writing, game design, and transitive storytelling for the past 3 years. And this is Infernoble Knights, a Rogue Theory. Unlike the legend of King Arthur that the original noble knights were based on, this follow-up sub-archetype is not British in origin. It actually stems from French history and a legitimate lineage of kings, rather than a mythos which cannot be validated upon.
Strange women lying in ponds, distributing swords is no basis for a system of government.
Now, before I transition into calling them the Flame Noble Knights for convenience's sake, rather than calling them the Infernoble Knights, you should know that the naming convention is a joke on the opposition that the French and the British have had over the centuries. The Flame Noble Knights consist of 6 main deck knights, 2 extra deck knights, they also have 3 equip spells, and 1 trap card. Now, while the original Noble Knights were inspired by the Arthurian legends, the Noble Knights of Flame are inspired by the Charlatan cycle, and while YouTubers will tell you they are based on the Song of Roland, that doesn't tell you the full story alone, and tends to leave out major important details of the historical piece known as the Matter of France, which itself is a part of the Three Matters. This detail, which is commonly left out, hints at a future sub-archetype of Noble Knights from the Roman period, as out of the 3 matters, 2 have been used thus far, the Matter of Britain and the Matter of France, leaving last the Matter of Rome. Now, while some of you might be interested in the pieces of lore not yet printed, I won't be discussing cards that as of yet don't currently exist. The Song of Roland narrates one key part of Charlemagne's history, his first and only ever major defeat in battle. This takes place during one of Charlemagne's campaigns to spread Christian worship to Muslim Spain. Charlemagne and his knights have been fighting for 7 years and stand outside the last city, Syracuse, occupied by the king Marcel. The wise King Marcel surrenders on the promise of providing treasure and converting to Christianity if Charlemagne and his army will leave, sparing the lives of his men. Charlemagne and his council of knights, tired from war, agree to peace and elect a messenger to ride into the city and deliver the news. Roland suggests his stepfather, Ganlin, but Ganlin is paranoid of his successful stepson and is afraid of being killed in the King Marcellus' court, so he tells them of a way to ambush the rearguard, led by Roland, and how to recover the ransom treasure as the army leaves Spain, so that he may leave with his life and return to France with the main army. The Muslim court and King Marcel agree and decide to spare Ganlin's life as he observes King Marcel's baptism. The army now regrouped and together head back to leave Spain. While on their journey back, Roland and Olivier in the rearguard get ambushed at the mountain pass leading back into France. Roland sees this ambush as an opportunity to establish himself as a warrior in combat, so he does not call for reinforcements.
But why?
Olivier, however, pleads with Roland to use his horn to call for help, but Roland believes this to be an act of cowardice and refuses to do so.
What? What the f-
Outnumbered and unprepared, Roland sees his men falling before him and realizes he has no choice but to call Charlemagne, if not to save his men, then to avenge them. Roland uses his horn until the sound of it bursts his eardrums and until he is the last remaining knight. Alone and with everyone else dead, Roland is filled with a vengeance as he cuts down waves of enemies on his own. Eventually, though, he sustains enough wounds that he can no longer stand. As he is falling, he stows the legendary blade Durandal behind him, so that while he crawls and fights on his back, the enemy cannot knock the sword from his hand, and then take it. This effect can be seen translated in card form from how Olivier, when he's equipped to a monster, allows it to be untargetable. Charlemagne and his knights arrive while Roland is still fighting, but of course it's too late, for Roland is far too wounded. Charlemagne and his men push back the enemy and pursue revenge on King Marcel, and learn of the betrayal of Ganlin, who they later execute accordingly. When Charlemagne returns to bury the dead, he discovers the sword Durandal, hidden behind young Roland's back. While his first act to not call the horn earlier cost him his life, the fact that he did not turn and run, abandoning his own men, and decided to fight to his last breath, is what will inspire the codes of chivalry for centuries to come, the Song of Roland, and even Napoleon himself. Now, before I feed you a deck list and a series of 2-card combos that play around Nibiru, let's cover the cards first. Roland. While Roland's beliefs on cowardice in the story caused a major defeat for Charlemagne and his army, in card form he synergizes with the archetype. While his synergy doesn't translate over to the original Noble Knights as he isn't considered a Noble Arms, Roland can be equipped from the hand as a quick effect to boost the attack of monsters you control and to let Charlemagne pop cards with his synchro effect. But that's not all, as Roland also carries a story-based effect that thankfully doesn't suck too much, as he can on the end phase add to your hand either a warrior or an equip spell from the deck. While it is slow, the rest of the deck is fast enough to be tier 1, and thankfully that makes up for this secondary worse effect. Astolfo, despite being able to special summon himself, copy levels, and recycle cards either in the graveyard or banished, Astolfo is a restricted monster like Spore or Glow Up Bulb, in that its effects can only be used once per duel. So despite being one of the best pieces of Fire Warrior support, you can only really run one as to not brick on him in later turns. Renaud, despite his co-conditional effects, you decidedly run 3 copies of this card, as special summoning and recursion are the key corners of any meta competitive deck. Olivier is the first in 3 level 4 Noble Knights, all of which can equip themselves from the graveyard, to selectively buff one monster. Olivier can make the monster he's equipped to untargetable, which for Eldritch means that they can't easily out your boss monster, but he can also special summon himself from the hand by sending either a Fire Warrior or equip spell from the hand or field to the graveyard. But doing so makes him become a level 1, which for the Noble Knights of Flame is perfect as this lets them synchro summon Vanguard Roland easily. Or alternatively, he can act as an extender to summon Assault or Needle Fiber. Ogier makes whatever he's equipped to unable to be destroyed by card effects, so you won't have to worry about Lightning Storm if he's around. Ogier on summon also lets you dump equip spells or Fire Warriors to the graveyard. This is key for setting up graveyard plays for Astolfo, Magius, or other equipable Noble Knights, and tech cards like God Phoenix Gearfried. Magius is the most underwhelming of these new Noble Knights, as Magius lacks a self-summoning or setup effect. The only purpose to playing him would be to continually recycle your cards with his primary effect to draw 1. But as you play out the archetype, you'll see that most games won't last long enough for this to be relevant. Vanguard Roland, as you can see from his text, he doesn't have much in the way of being a reliable extra deck monster. But he is a generic level 5 tuner who can let us synchro climb into Charlemagne, and he gives us a way to equip a card to Charlemagne as a quick effect, giving us interruption on our opponent's turn without having to rely on the main deck version of Roland or traditional trap cards. He also grabs you a monster on the end phase for plays next turn, while at the same time thinning out your deck of equip spells that would otherwise be bricks if you drew them. Emperor Charlemagne. While previous boss monsters in the Noble Knights focused on to protect the castle with Artorigus being the stable center of protection, Charlemagne proves worthy of being the emperor who founded modern day Europe. While he doesn't carry negates, he carries disruption, which tends to be the stronger option of the two. After all, look at Nibiru and Spiral Sleeper. He can also reuse equip spells from the graveyard while equipping a monster from the deck. Overall, he is just a resource advantage engine, and he is the key win condition of the deck. Moving on to the blades, there's a few things you should know. First, they can be equipped to any monster, even your opponent's, forcing out interruption from them early on. Second, if the card they are equipped to leaves the field and hits the graveyard, they trigger a secondary effect that will often net you pluses or at least even the playing field. Third, they all destroy themselves after using their effect. And fourth, only one of their 2 effects can be used once per turn. Durandal lets you add any level 5 or lower Fire Warrior monster you could want from your deck. It also lets you special summon a level 5 or lower Fire Warrior in the graveyard if the equipped monster hits the graveyard. But this effect comes with the restriction that you are locked into warrior monsters for the rest of the turn. Houtclair grants a double attack to one monster, but allows only that monster to attack that turn if it uses this effect. If that monster leaves the field while equipped with Houtclair, you can target one face-up monster on the field and destroy it. This card can be equipped passively onto your monsters that your opponent will want to out as a nice way to counteract whatever play they use to remove that card. Or you can put this on your opponent's weaker monsters to net you advantage when you remove them yourself. Joyeuse adds any Fire Warrior monster to your hand. If it's sent to the graveyard because the equipped monster is sent to the graveyard, however, you can special summon one Fire Warrior monster from your hand instead. While this card doesn't have any restrictions on either its activation or its destruction effect since the card is meant to be used later in the game as a piece of recursion, I suggest running 1 or 2 copies at the most, but never 3. Oliphant Horn. This card was primarily printed to finish tying up the lore for the Song of Roland. While it is playable and in theory can act like a Salamangreat Rage, it isn't searchable and its second effect locks you into warriors even if you use it on your opponent's turn. So generally it isn't the best card to run. Now that we know all the cards that are released in this archetype, we can say that this deck still has the potential to establish itself as a top tier contender, but if we consider all the support that exists for the warrior monster typing, we can establish boards and combos that not only devastate our opponent, but devastate the metagame. The Sublime Knight 1-card combo uses a Neospace Connector-like ability to get a second warrior monster onto the field for Assault, who from there lets us build a board ending with a negate, a hand rip, and a pop. But sadly it doesn't play around Nibiru, However, it is still incredibly impactful as your boss monster will be untargetable and unable to be popped, all while going +2 in terms of hand advantage. Ogier plus Durandal lets you nearly end on the same board, but provides you a way to play around Nibiru and to go +1 in terms of hand advantage, assuming you don't forget to use Roland's effect like I do in this replay. Ogier plus Renaud, while this combo ends on the same board, it takes a different route, utilizing Rosalind to make sure you can summon Gearfried and have a negate before you get Nibiru'd. Ironically, while this shows the synergy the two archetypes can have together, the fact that Linsolin is considered part French in the traditional stories makes this synergy seem like intentional game design rather than co-compatibility. And now, finally, Sublime Knight plus Renaud. While this combo doesn't play around Nibiru, it does feature another 2-card combo that will end with you having 3 negates, a pop, 1 card rip, and leaving you with 4 remaining cards in your hand. Now, while I don't cover every possible combo, I hope I gave you an idea of the consistency and the power that these Infernoble Knights have. Here's the list I'm currently playing around with. For those of you who are looking to hand loop your opponent, I currently recommend Neo Space Connector, Aqua Dolphin, Violon Sphere, Smoke Grenade, Trishula, and Phantom Fortress for hand loops. For going second builds, I currently recommend obvious cards like Dark Ruler No More, Clarant for OTK potential, and Crossover for going second spot removal. For recursion and consistency, I suggest Ignites for easy access to God Phoenix Gearfried, and Rekindling for its ability to revive Charlemagne, Renaud, and Astolfo. Now, while the original Noble Knights might have fallen short of ever being meta, for Charlemagne and his men, for the glory of France, and for the glory of Rome, the Infernoble Knights are here to claim their throne.
So you return, and sooner than expected. I see. Too many swordsmen, are there? And you wield the sword as well? What will you do? Huh. So that is how you plan to win the day? So be it. I reward your cleverness this time.
Roland, Roland, your name will live in song. Whenever brave men take up arms to right a grievous wrong, the fairest flower of chivalry to bloom in all the land, and the noblest of all the knights of Charlemagne.